Welcome to the Mendoza Podcast, financial talk that makes sense. I'm your Illinois State Controller, Susana Mendoza, and I want to help answer all the questions you have about money matters, but we're maybe afraid to ask. We're going to learn a lot and have some fun together. Hi, and welcome back to the Mendoza Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about budgeting and getting your finances in order. I know it can really feel daunting sometimes and tough to know where to even get started. So we'll have some tips to help get you going. My guest today is Dr. Angela Fontes, Executive Director of the Northwest Center in Chicago. Angela, welcome to the Mendoza Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well,
this is super exciting.
Thank you for being here. And I just want to ask you if you could start off for our viewers, telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Center. We're a community-based organization in Belmont-Cragin, and we do both programming as well as organizing in the community. I'm relatively new in position. I'm actually a trained researcher, and I've been studying finances for about 20 years now. And so
wow, that's a long time. Yeah,
it's super exciting to do this. A couple years ago, I got my accredited financial counseling license, and so that's another piece that I sort of bring into the work we do at the center.
Well, that's excellent. Sounds like people are really talking to an expert when they go meet with you. So
we try.
So that's why we're so happy to have you today.
Yeah.
So let's think about if you are a person who just decided, you finally got there. Because you have to get there, right? You have to be willing to do this. But you're at a point where you're saying, I'm going to get my life together. I want to get a grip on my finances.
Sure.
I need to start out my life, right? Where do I start?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you should probably think about as you're starting to think through, like, what does my financial life mean? One, and we're going to talk more, I'm sure, about creating a budget. What does that look like? How do we do it?
Yeah, like I'd want to know how do you even go about setting up a basic budget?
Right. How do you get started? So I think that's one. I think another one is understanding where you are. And so part of that is starting to track, but I think another part of that is checking your credit. And there are great ways to check your credit for free every year.
What are some of those ways?
Yeah, so annualcreditreport.com. Every consumer has the ability to check their credit with each of the three bureaus once a year.
For free?
Yes, for free. So that's another piece I would say to new consumers just starting to think about where to start. I think the other thing is to start to think about what are your financial goals. And financial goals don't have to be big. They don't have to be, I'm going to buy a house in 2 years, or I'm going to be totally set for retirement in 3 years. Financial goals can be, I'm just going to start putting away $5 a month. And that's my goal. So I think those three things are good ways to sort of get started, dip your toe in.
So I always think that before you can get your financial house in order, I think the key for me when I talk to people is being financially aware.
Yeah.
Right? So
totally.
Number one, of course, we said you've got to want to get your finances in order. But part of how do we even start a basic budget? I think the first thing, would you agree, is realizing what your expenses and what your revenues coming in and going out.
Yeah, for sure. So I always advise people start by just getting an understanding of what they're spending on, what their real income that they're bringing in is, and not even thinking about how much do I want to spend here or how much am I spending, or judgment. Don't judge where you're spending. Just get a sense of where is your money actually going every month.
Yeah. How much is coming in?
Yep.
So you're really, you understand that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how much is going out?
Right.
So I'm trying to start this budget for the first time. Again, we now know we want to do it. What are the nuts and bolts of getting started with that?
Yeah, so I think that's the place to start, is just for maybe 2 months, maybe 3 if you have some unexpected expenses. Just track what you're spending on. Okay. Track what's coming in, track what's spending, and there are a lot of great tools to do that. So a lot of financial institutions build those into accounts, but there's a ton of websites out there that you can go to, link up your accounts, and it will do that tracking for you.
Okay, so now we know what our money coming in and money coming out is. What's the next step in our budget?
The next step
creation?
I generally suggest is for consumers to go back to your goals. And I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all budget, and I don't believe in this idea of judgment of good spending and bad spending. It's really all about where do you want to be as a consumer, what's important to you, and what are those big things or little things that you want to accomplish in terms of your financial life. So start there, and then start to think about drafting your budget.
Okay, but then once you know, here are my goals, this is what I want to do, our goals have to be realistic, though,
Totally.
right? And I think that's where a lot of people might find themselves, hitting a brick wall, is that the most important thing for everyone to understand with a budget is that you cannot spend more than you have coming in.
Yes.
Now, theoretically, you could, because you could, which a lot of people do, is they're like, well, I really want that. I can't afford it. I'll put it on a credit card, right?
Yeah.
But ideally, if we're talking budgeting 101, is your income is really important. That's your starting point. But you should never spend more than the money that you have coming in.
Yeah, and I would say if you do have a goal that's maybe exceeding your income, then we start to talk about, well, what are ways you can increase your income? Is that a side gig? Is that looking for a new role? But yeah, we always have to balance that out. And I think the other thing we need to keep in mind is that a lot of folks have debt already. And so what is it taking from our budget just to service that debt? What are the minimum payments? What do we really need to pay that down? And that has to be part of a good budget. We can't ignore the existing debt, unfortunately.
Well, your budget's always going to have like the needs versus the wants, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely.
like you start it with, here's how much money I have. Here are my necessity bills that have to be paid, right? Is it your mortgage payment, obviously? If you have a car and you haven't paid it off, you've got to pay for that. You might have some student loans that have to be paid. You might have credit card bills that you have to pay down, right? There's tuition for your kids. There's all these kinds of things, but that's where you have to really analyze if you are overspending your means. Is where do you cut, right? Do you need as big of a house as you have? Or if you can't cut your way through it, then obviously it's I've got to pick up some hours, or I've got to maybe have a side hustle, but something. You can't just leave the status quo.
Yeah, you can't just leave the status quo. And the other thing I always tell folks is don't expect that you're never going to order Starbucks again, right? Like
for sure.
Maybe you're spending right now more than you should be on some of those necessities, but understand that to be successful and to stick with a budget, you've got to kind of scale those back over time. And don't judge yourself if you really needed the Starbucks that day. Just know you're going to have to make it up somewhere.
Sure. But the point about being financially aware is, though, it will blow your mind when you realize how much money you've been spending on Starbucks. Or how much money you've been spending on clothes that you don't actually need. Or how much money you've been spending on entertainment costs that maybe you can rein in a little bit, right? Or your streaming services or things like that. So the reality of it is if we want to get serious about budgeting, if we want to get serious about meeting our goals, you have to make some tough decisions sometimes. But it doesn't mean for the rest of your life. It just means while you start hitting your goals. And then I think just from my own experience is that once you start hitting those goals, you realize how fun it is to actually be financially disciplined. And it's almost like a game with yourself to get better and better and better at it.
Yeah, one of the techniques I will sometimes use is to have folks visualize what it will feel like to have $500 or $1,000. What's an appropriate level for them? To know and think about what that's going to feel like when you have that in your account and you know the money's there in case you need it. And I find that really motivating for folks to think about what that's going to feel like when they have that goal.
Well, I think that's a really excellent tip for getting people to stick to their budget. But where do you see that things tend to go wrong?
Yeah, I think folks often make they get really excited about setting some goals, and so they set some pretty lofty goals.
Here we go back to they have to be realistic,
they have
right?
to be
you have
realistic.
to be able to achieve them in some reasonable amount of time.
And setting that time parameter at the outset, I think, is important. So if you want to save for a car, we're not going to maybe be able to do that in a year. Maybe it's going to take 3 years for us to be able to do that. I think the other place people go wrong is if they have a bad month, then it's sort of like, oh, well, I can't do this. I'm not doing this anymore. And so not sort of sticking with it and forgiving yourself if you maybe do slip up 1 month.
Yeah, give yourself a little flexibility. Maybe this month was a bad month, but you commit to doing less than what you were originally going to do the following month, right? You make up for it. But the point is to stick with it. Now, on that point, I mean, just having a budget, I think this is what maybe people fear is that once you have it, it becomes real, right? You set this goal for yourself that like, I want to do it. Please go ahead and have some water. I'll talk a little so you can drink. Yes, but once you set it, right, which avoidance is like the biggest thing, right? So we're all guilty of it. Everybody is like, I have to make that phone call. I really ought to make that phone call or whatever it may be. I know I need a budget, but once I actually sit down and and really take a look at my finances, then it becomes very real.
Yeah.
And if I have this goal, I need to stick with it. It's like working out for the first time. We all don't want to do it. We know it's good for us, but it's tough to get started.
Yeah.
But I guess, and the point here was that when people finally get to that point, make it clear to them that having a budget does not necessarily mean that you're making huge sacrifices.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where the idea of really having a realistic budget comes in. And I think the importance of goals can't be overstressed. And so we know techniques, whether it's from New Year's resolutions around working out or something different, what can help us stick to behavior change. So I have folks handwrite it. There's something about handwriting their goals that sort of imprints it in the brain differently. Research tells us that.
Interesting.
I have folks post their goals somewhere that they can see them. I have folks build in accountability, if that's partners or family or friends who ask them on a regular basis, like, how are you doing on your budget? Or some other accountability tools that are available online that you can sign up for. All of those things, I think, help you stick to the budget, but it's hard. Any behavior change is hard, and this is no different.
Sure. And, I think, for example, right now I have a little boy, he's 12, and he's in Boy Scouts.
Yes.
And it's funny that you and I are meeting right now because at this very same time, his Boy Scout troop one of their projects that they have to do for one of their merit badges is actually creating their first budget. So we have to decide as a family what that budget's going to be. Yeah. And then he has to do things to earn the money for the budget, right? Yeah. So he's too young to actually work because he's only 12. Otherwise, I'm like, you're going to get a job,
Right.
It's too bad. I wish they, but whatever. That's a whole other topic. But we as parents will determine, what the chores or what other activities he will do that we will pay him for.
Yeah.
But he has to then also, the budget's going to be based also on an item or something that he wants to purchase that's reasonable. And then during this process, he has to then research at least 3 different places that this item is sold.
Great.
So that he can check the different prices, right? Which again, if you want to stay on a budget, if you want something, you don't just go to the first place that sells it. If you really want to make the value of your money stretch, you've got to look to where you can get the best deal. Is it on sale at one store versus another, right? So after he's done his research on at least 3 places that sell this item to try to get the best price, then he has to decide, after all this work, if he still wants to buy it.
Oh, okay. Right? All right.
So I'm hopeful that I can convince my kid to not buy whatever he wants and maybe invest the money instead, right?
Oh, sure,
like pick up a stock or do something different. And that these are moments where you can educate on, delayed gratification, right?
Absolutely.
On things. It's often amazing how much we think we need something when we don't need it at all. We just want it, and there's a difference, right? I don't necessarily know if I will be able to, after this long process, convince him not to buy whatever it is he wants.
Right.
But I'm kind of hopeful. But at the end of the day, I won't judge. He's earned it. If he's done the work and he's done this project based on something that he wants and is willing to work hard to get the money, then, we'll let him get it. But maybe if he still wants it, if he gets a better deal than what we thought it was going to cost originally, maybe we'll put the difference into, some other kind of investment vehicle. But the point is, we've got these budgets. Once we have them, right? Let's say we got our budget. What else besides a budget should we be looking at from a financial perspective?
Yeah, you mentioned one. I think that is teaching folks, and I think particularly kids as they're growing up, teaching them how to be good consumers. So teaching them how to shop around, teaching them how to do that research, teaching them about things like buying in bulk, right? If it's something that's an appropriate way to purchase. But I think having the conversations within the family. So research tells us that kids who grow up in families that talk about money, good, bad, or indifferent, do better and have better financial outcomes as they get older. And so I think even just having those conversations in the family with kids, with your partner, right?
Sure.
There's a whole couple dimension there for families around money. I think those are all really important things that in addition to a budget might help you as a consumer and your family, your household, sort of have better financial outcomes.
Well, for sure. I'm really happy that I always say I won the lotto by marrying my husband because he and I are both on the same page about finances. We're both, very fiscally responsible. We're always working to get the highest credit rating we can for ourselves. I'm always trying to do that for the state of Illinois, you know. But having fiscal discipline is really important, to not live beyond your means. And these are things we talk about with our son, but they're still challenging. No matter how good you are doing at something, you're going to have unexpected emergencies, or, you know, somebody could lose their job. And no matter how good of a job you've been doing, it's always rough, no matter what. Unless if you're, I guess, at an economic point where money doesn't matter. But certainly in my life, and I'm sure in yours, and all the normal people I know, money's always an issue. And in fact, when it comes to couples, there's like a whole industry whose only job is to give therapy to couples who are fighting about what? Money. Yes. So, you know, we think about it too from the Office of Controller's standpoint. We're always thinking about how can we help Illinois residents improve their finances, right? And one of the interesting things that we've seen here is that Illinois, compared to neighboring states, has thousands of more people than other states. And this is not a good data set. Who are unbanked. So like people who don't even have a basic bank account. So because of that, we created a program here in Illinois. We passed legislation to create it. It's called Bank on Illinois. And we kind of do the digging for the residents all over the state. So it's not just a Chicago thing, it's all over. We've partnered with credit unions, with banks, who can help offer zero cost entry or extremely low entry, like no fees or fines associated with entry-level bank accounts, so that people can at least be banked. It is not a good idea ever to, you know, hoard stashes of cash anywhere in your home, in the walls or in the mattresses or whatever. If your house goes up in flames, so does all your money, right? So, or somebody can break in, steal it. You know, crazier things have happened. But it's interesting that there are still so many people who clearly are employed, are generating revenue, but still don't have bank accounts. And one of the saddest things I saw during the pandemic were businesses that didn't have the right bank accounts. They, for example, maybe had a personal bank account, and they would use their personal bank account to manage their business. And then during the pandemic, when those PPP loans were available, they didn't qualify for them because they didn't have the right account. So, you know, do you see this problem often in your consultancy or where you
work? Absolutely. So the FDIC recently came out with the results of their 2023 survey of un- and underbanked. And I want to say that the figure this year was 4.2% of all Americans do not have regular access to a bank account. And I think the math is that's something like 56 million Americans across the country don't have.
That's crazy. I mean, it really is. Most people wouldn't think that, but it's a true fact. And that's why we wanted to do something to address it. But, you know, forget about even PPP loans, just the fact that for you to cash your check without a bank account, you have to go to a currency exchange or a payday lender, or even your grocery store, but they don't do it for free, right? They're charging you to have access to your own money. And I think that's a travesty, which is easily fixable. So there's a remedy for that, and it's called a bank account and a zero fee entry bank account. They want your money because the banks take your money and then they lend it out and they make interest off of lending your money. But the deal is that when you need your money's there for when you need it, but it's protected and it's insured up to $250,000 a year by the FDIC. So there's no good reason to not have your money in a bank. At the very bare minimum, a bank account, right? If you become much more financially savvy, you'll be investing in the market or doing other things. But today's episode is just basic budgeting. But I would say have a budget, but at the very, very beginning of that, you should have a bank account.
I think there's the security aspects of having a bank account, not carrying a lot of cash. We know as safe as Chicago can be, that's always a risk wherever you are. But I think that there's also just the friction and sort of opportunity cost of all the time it takes to go get money orders to pay your bill, or just the lack of your ability to write a check or send a Venmo. There's so much technology that's really dependent upon having that bank account that folks are missing out on if they don't have one.
Really they are. It's kind of like not having electricity. I mean, really think about it. It's like still using paper maps instead of GPS units. It's really that almost like a mandatory thing in life to have a bank account. And if you don't, you're absolutely missing out and you're limiting your opportunities in huge ways, not to mention the ability to build credit as well, right? So I do think that that's something that we need to do a better job of.
Yeah.
Illinois, being the amazing state that it is, to have more unbanked people than the states around us really made no sense to me. It was like, this is an issue that we have to address.
Yeah. So I think it's really critical that states are doing a bank on type program because we know if we just look totally at the U.S., it's that 4.2 number. But when we look at some specific subpopulations, like individuals with disabilities are unbanked at 3 times the rate
Wow.
the general population is. We look at single parents, which was an interesting finding this year. They're 3 to 4 times as likely to be unbanked as married couples with kids. And so as we think about these populations who we know are financially vulnerable in the first place, just supporting them with policies, with legislation and programs like Bank On is just critical.
And so if anyone's interested, of course, I always throw in a plug for our Bank On Illinois. Just go to our website, the Illinois Controller's website, and you can just search Bank On Illinois. We have a whole website dedicated to it, and you can scroll through, depending on where you live. Is it a bank? Is it a credit union? But these are trusted partners that we've already done the vetting for them. Yeah. So there's no reason other than you're not getting started with your budgeting, right? Yep. And actually, it'll be interesting when we're asking people to do as a basic step, see how much money they have coming in, but then also more importantly, see where the money's going, right? They can see how much money they've already spent on fees alone to have access to their own money. Yeah. When you do the math on that, you're going to be like, how much money did I waste here? I could have that same money generating interest for me, working for me, instead of me working for someone else, giving them my money, if you just had a bank account. So it's a good start.
Many of the bank accounts now have these sorts of tools built in. So you can look at whether it's your bank account is sort of classifying your transactions or even just being able to print out a list of your transactions and categorize those yourself. Just the ability to do that and have that help you monitor your spending is really critical.
Awesome. So we have banking, budgeting, and discipline, right? But then also don't be too hard on yourself, right? Like everyone needs to get started and no one's going to be perfect. And we all at some times have harder months, or you just really, really, wanted that one thing. And so that means, you get 2 less things next month. That's how you have to do it, right? The goal is to, by the end of the year, you've reached some of these goals that you set for yourself. And to your point, start small. If you've never done this before, don't expect, to go work on Wall Street next week. Just get started. That's goal number 1. Let's start, right? Goal number 2, become financially aware. Goal number 3, set some budgeting stipulations, right?
Yeah.
And then goal number 4, don't give up on yourself. And goal number 5, keep going.
Yep, I think that's a great list of goals and a great way just to get started. And again, don't think of all 5 even at first. Just think of the first step and what's right in front of you and do that now.
Yeah, and so on that note, because I think one of the limitations to getting started is what if you live paycheck to paycheck, right? Yeah. So it's right now we're talking about, do this with your money. But for some people, talking about money is super hard because they don't really have much money. And I always say that, my parents, they were paycheck to paycheck all the time. And I saw how that worried them. It was always a concern. They worked so hard, worked multiple jobs just to give us, what we needed. Not necessarily everything we wanted. No kid ever gets everything they want, but definitely what we needed. So I thank them so much. But I did see when they didn't think I was watching or hearing, I could hear those concerns, right? And but my parents always told me, never talk about money. It's taboo. It's totally disrespectful. It's rude. Yep. And no, I've come to realize, certainly as controller too, you can imagine how many financial people I talk to all the time, that the only people who don't talk about money are really people who don't have much money or who have stressors because of money, right? Yeah. Money issues. And so it's not fun to talk about something that's stressing you out, right? If you're sick, you're not going to be like, hey, let me tell you about what's going on with me, right? Most people don't want to talk about those things that cause them stress. So I grew up with this mentality, which was don't talk about money. It's rude. But you know who talks about money all the time? Rich people. Yeah. People with money, they love to talk about money, and good for them, and they should, because being financially aware and knowing how to make your money work harder for you instead of you working harder to earn that money, which is always going to be less money, right, than if you let it work in the investment world, is a really important skill set to have. Yep. And it's something we should be talking to everyone about, including our kids. And so whenever we talk about investing and I meet some young person and I ask them, do you have a Roth IRA? And usually they're like, no, what's that?
What?
And I'm like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about a Roth IRA if you're working. And I say, look, I'm never going to be rich in public service, right? I'm an honest politician, but I want you to be rich.
Yeah.
And we should be talking to everyone about these financial tools and hope that people get started. Because I think the biggest obstacle to people doing this is themselves.
Yeah.
It's not even maybe that they don't have enough money, but it's that you just don't want to talk about it or deal with it or get started. But again, I've rambled on too long. If you're paycheck to paycheck, how do we get people motivated about getting started?
Yeah, I think there's an element of just, for lack of a better term, exposure that needs to happen. And so behavioral science, we call it ostriching, right? Like, I don't want to see what's coming, so I'm just going to stick my head in the
that's
sand.
perfect. Right.
And there have been times that I've worked with clients where I've said, listen, your goal is to just check your bank account twice a week for the next 2 months. That's where we're going to start. Because so many people don't, the anxiety related with just checking the balance of my bank account.
Yeah, I don't want to look.
It's just too much.
Yeah.
Having folks run a credit report, oh my gosh, I don't want to know. I don't want to see in black and white how much I owe.
Yeah.
Let's work up to that. Let's make a goal that in 2 months, we're going to be ready to just run your credit report and start to sit down and pull together a balance sheet for you. Look at what you owe, what are your assets, put all that together. But sometimes it's just about getting folks used to thinking and talking and facing the hard topic that can often be money.
Yeah, but it's never going to get better if you don't become aware of what your situation is.
Yeah.
I thought about that as state controller when I first walked into this job, and we had we didn't know we had $17 billion in unpaid bills. We thought it was closer, believe it or not, to 5 at the time because really around 8, but it was, the governor was saying it was like 5, and turns out it was 16.7. So 3 times worse than what, was being projected. And I passed transparency legislation to actually let me see what the true amount was, not what we were telling the public or the press, but what's the true amount. And it turns out it was almost 3 times as bad. And then having to convince the credit rating agencies to not downgrade us once we realized that it was much worse than we anticipated.
Yeah.
But my whole point was I need to know how bad it is so that I could set my plan of attack on paying it down, right?
That's right.
It doesn't help anyone in Illinois for us to pretend that things are better financially than they actually are. And it's a bummer when they're not as good as we'd like them to be, but it's definitely worse to be blind to it knowingly, right? So you can't fix it if you can't see the problem. And so I would equate this reticence for people to take that first step is think of it as a disease, right? You woke up and you've got this really nasty something. Is it a wart? Is it like a boil? Who knows, right? But it hurts.
Yeah.
But you put your pants on and nobody sees it. No one knows it's there. You know it's there, right? But you don't want to deal with it. It's only going to get worse. It's going to get horrible. So it's like whether it's a wart or whatever that you don't want people to see, if you don't start acknowledging that it's there, that you have to get some compound W and put it on, it's never going to go away and it's only going to get worse and it spreads, right? This avoidance is a really, really dangerous thing to do, especially when it comes to your finances. So I always say to people, it's okay. If your finances stink, own it.
Right.
But just know that you need to fix them, right? And you're never going to fix them if you don't acknowledge it and you don't get started on putting together that budget, that plan on how to get out of it, and know that you can as long as you're willing to address it.
Yeah, often with folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, I'll say, listen, we know we're going to fail somewhere. We know we're not going to cover everything. We know something's going to fall through the cracks. We can either not look and be surprised at what falls through the crack, and that comes with fees, penalties, all the bad additional things that could happen. Or we can say, I'm going to be in control of what fails, and I'm going to decide what's not going to get paid this month. And so having that power to say, it's not going to be perfect. And me knowing is not going to make the situation better, but me knowing is going to give me the power to make the decisions that put me in the driver's seat around those decisions related to my finances.
Exactly. I love it. Love it. So what are some other things that people should really be thinking about when it comes to their money?
Yeah, I think, we hit a little bit on family dynamics, and there are a whole lot of family dynamics that go around money. And so I love the idea of talking to kids and really socializing kids to what money is, what money does, what money isn't, and what it doesn't. I have a daughter who's considering maybe marriage in the next few years.
Okay.
And so I've been talking to her a lot about how do you have the conversations with your partner, your
Yeah.
potential partner about money, and making sure that you're financially compatible should you decide to combine finances and sort of live together. So I think that's another area.
It's like you read my mind because I was going to ask you. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
My next question I was thinking in my head was like, is there any advice that you
Yeah.
would give couples for combining their finances for the first time? Like couples
Yeah.
who are thinking about doing that for the first time. What's your advice?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to awareness. It's funny, I just got married about 10 years ago.
Congrats.
And pretty early in my relationship with my husband, I said, we're going to have to run a credit report on you.
Totally. Well, this is before you got married, though.
Yes. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I was going to say, don't wait till you're married to run that credit report.
This was before. And I said, you know what I do for a living? And he was like, yeah, I do. Let's sit down and we'll run both credit reports and just talk about what's on those.
Yeah.
So that we're just fully disclosive about no surprises, right?
So you've totally talked to your daughter about all this,
Oh,
what
yeah.
the pitfalls are. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you recommend, I mean, like, I feel like it just depends on the case, but I do know for sure that tons of couples split up because of financial
Absolutely.
problems, right? So that's why I was telling you, I hit the lotto with my husband, metaphorically speaking, because clearly I've never won the lotto, but
Yeah.
in the husband lotto, I won. But we are so compatible and we're very financially aware. We talk about it all
Yeah.
the time. We're, reconciling our stuff all the time. But I still have my own account. He has his own account, and then we have a combined account, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if he wants to buy something out of his account, like, buy whatever you want. I'm not that wife who's going to be like, no, because I know that we run our finances, very well. We're paying all our bills. We're not, we're a very minimalistic house, so it's not like we're always wanting things. Stuff is
Yeah.
just stuff, and for me, doesn't have a lot of value. We don't drive fancy cars. We definitely, I would say, live. We'd like to think that we live below our means, but we grew up with family. He had one of 9 kids, right? He's one of 9 kids. Their family wasn't wealthy. It's like, can you imagine how much money you need for 9 kids?
Yeah.
Like my mother-in-law was a stay-at-home mom, and my father-in-law was an electrician who raised 9 kids as an IBEW electrician. So it's a wonderful story. My parents worked multiple jobs just to get their 3 kids by. And so I don't need like fancy things to be happy in my life,
Yeah.
We just need each other, and that's a beautiful thing. But it is still like, if you need something, honey, just get it, right?
Yeah.
Like, same with me. If I want to buy something for my husband or my son, like Christmas gifts are a perfect example. I don't want those coming out of our mutual account. It's my gift for my husband or my son or my friends or whoever without any judgment, right? Because it's my money. So that's kind of like my own little personal budget, right? And he has his own little personal play money.
Yeah.
And then we have our family finances, which is the bulk of
Yeah.
what we do. And that's where all our bills that have to get paid as a family go into, right?
Yeah.
All the other fun stuff is to each their own.
Yeah.
But I think that is a very healthy dynamic. I mean, whatever works for everybody is what they need to do. But for us, it's like there's never an issue of, hey, I bought a pair of shoes. Can I pull it out of the family account, right? It's like, if I need a pair of shoes, I'm going to buy a pair of shoes. And if he
Yeah.
needs a pair of shoes, buy your pair of shoes, right?
Yeah, what the research tells us is important is not how couples sort of decide to work their financial life, whether they combine everything, whether everything's totally separate. The thing that matters is that they are clear and they agree on it.
Yes.
And so whether you want to have totally separate finances and you take these bills and I'm going to take these bills, or whether you just put everything into one big pot, the point is that you've had the conversations with your partner and that you are aligned in how things are going to be handled. And so I think those conversations are what's really important. And then I would say that can change, right? So I was working in a large academically affiliated organization in a leadership role, sort of as corporate as a nonprofit can get. And I decided a few years ago I wanted to step away from that and do a community-focused, boots-on-the-ground nonprofit. So my salary clearly changed.
It reflected the boots on the ground nonprofit, yes.
And so I had to have those conversations with my husband again of like this, things are going to change for us. What does that
Yeah.
look like? let's renegotiate what our finances, what's shared and what's not shared, and who pays what.
Sure.
And I think even as folks are thinking about combining financial lives, clarity is important. And so I am an advocate for prenups. Like, just have
really?
the conversations,
Yeah, interesting.
and be clear about where, should the worst happen, where you all want to land, and align around those things. And it could be just as simple as writing out a document that says you agree. That might not hold up in court, but I think it's the conversations about that really matter.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I don't have a prenup with my husband, and he's not getting rid of me. I'm so lucky I married him, and he always says the same thing. So
Yeah.
But I also come from a family where his parents have been married for 63 years, and mine were married for 33 before my dad passed away. And I think I got a winner. But to your point, hey, I mean, certainly people who have already have established finances need to do what they need to do to protect themselves, because the reality of life is that most people don't end up together for 63 years.
Yeah.
And you may start thinking, I'm love and adore this person, would marry them 100 times over, and then a year later that's not the case. So
yeah, so I did do a prenup with my husband. It's a document, we both signed it. It's never been filed.
Oh, well, you better file it just in case if you have it.
It was the conversation,
Yes.
I think, that really mattered. And we put more than just the finances in there. So we have a dog that was my dog until I started dating my husband. Now he's my husband's dog. So
That's so
visitation
funny.
related to the dog is in there.
Oh my goodness.
But it's just a recording of the
Yes.
conversation we had about where we want to be and how we want to sort of show up in case the worst happens.
No, I think that's just an amazing point.
Yeah.
So make sure, again, now that we're going to take it back to the individual person
Yeah.
who is not married or is married, as a couple here, that you do this together. If you're a couple, you should be looking at budgeting together, right? But if you're an individual, do it now. Don't wait till you're married. The best gift that you can give your partner is actually walking into a relationship financially sound.
Totally.
Right? And not being afraid to talk about money. Instilling this good fiscal habit in a relationship is going to make for a healthier relationship.
Just like you want, two whole people emotionally to walk into a relationship, you want two whole people financially to walk into a relationship.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great advice. So anything else you want to add before we
No,
close
I think,
up?
again, just, having those basics down, giving yourself a break, thinking through what your goals are, what's important to you financially, is really the great place to sort of start in taking control of your financial life.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. I agree with you. I think that you've given us some really helpful tips today and some helpful advice, right, for creating a solid plan that I know you all can stick to. So great having you here. I hope
Thanks
you
so
join
much.
us again. And, to our viewers, I just want to say thank you for being here. It's been hopefully, I should say, instructional for you. And if you weren't thinking about doing a budget before, get to work, because everyone should have a budget of some sort. Remember, it doesn't have to be some crazy complicated thing. It's just a start. So figure out where you can cut back, where you can save, and how much money you have coming in, because remember, being financially aware is the key number one to getting your life in order. There's going to be challenges for sure, and we all make mistakes in the process, so give yourself some grace, but I know you can do it. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Mendoza Podcast.